here in Kansas City, Missouri. My name is Zach Bigley. I'm the broadcaster for the Rough Riders. Now, first and foremost, Rough Riders were playing as the Dallas Black Giants. How fun is that for you just to come out here and see a minor league team and be playing for New Jersey like that tonight?
It never gets old. It really doesn't. I take great pride every time a professional baseball team puts on a uniform of a Negro Leagues or a former black professional baseball team, because it's carrying forward the legacy. And what you all are doing, you're helping educate baseball fans about a piece of history that they likely did not know about. And that's a perfect extension of the work that we're doing in Kansas City. I remind people all the time, the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum is an educational resource. Yes, we are a museum, and we're there to preserve a very precious piece of baseball and Americana, but we're also an educational resource. And so every time we can form this kind of alliance, this kind of partnership, we're just helping make more people aware of this very rich, important piece of baseball and American history.
For some people who don't necessarily know your background, originally you were in marketing with the museum when it was created, and then of course became the president. Can you go over your background a little bit and kind of how you got here?
Well, believe it or not, y'all, I started at the museum as a volunteer 29 years ago. Who knew? Yeah, who knew? And I absolutely fell in love with the story, and I fell in love with the athletes who made the story. Now, I consider myself to be a baseball fan, and I quickly realized I didn't know a doggone thing about this history, because here was an entire chapter of baseball history that I knew absolutely nothing about. Now, I knew the names Satchel Paige, Cool Papa Bell, Josh Gibson. Those are transcending kinds of names. Most baseball fans have heard those names. As I've oftentimes said, they may not know just how great they really were, but they've likely heard those names. But I had no idea about the breadth, the depth, the scope, the magnitude that this history represented both on and off the field, and I became completely enamored of it. I wanted to learn as much as I could, and y'all, I didn't want to keep it to myself. I wanted everybody else to feel the same way I felt, and I was working for the Kansas City Star. In 1993, I was the senior copywriter in the Star's promotions department, which functioned as its in-house advertising agency. And so I drew the assignment of promoting the museum's first traveling exhibition, an exhibition called Discover Greatness. It is still touring the country today. It is in Piscataway, New Jersey, as we speak. And so I needed to go down and meet the folks who were involved with this Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, which I didn't even know existed at that time. And at that time, y'all, we were in a little tiny one-room office about as big as this area that we're all kind of gathered in, and had a conference room table. And I walk in, and the late Don Motley, who was the executive director of this fledgling museum, and I walk in and I say, well, I'm looking for the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And he looks up at me and he smiles and says, son, you're standing in it. But little did I know that I had literally walked into what would become my passion. Yeah, it's not often that you get to follow your passion. And I didn't know it was my passion until I got immersed in it. And then I started to meet the players. And the more players I met, the deeper I fell in love with this story. And I've been afforded a tremendous opportunity to do something that I really love doing, something that I understand is so much bigger than I am, because when I have an opportunity, and our team at the Negro League Baseball Museum understands this as well, we have an opportunity to leave a legacy, something that will hopefully stand the test of time, that others will continue to enjoy for years to come. And to me, that is as gratifying a thing as I could have possibly done. And it has afforded me the opportunity to be in places like this and sit down and talk to people like yourselves about this history. And here I am, a kid from Crawfordville, Georgia. Crawfordville, Georgia, y'all, is all the 500 people. Yeah, it's all of 500 people. There'll likely be more people here at the ball game tonight than there are in Crawfordville, Georgia. And the fact that I've gotten a chance to meet American presidents doing this work, first ladies of these United States, including the state of Texas' very own Laura Bush and Michelle Obama, and walk them through the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and of course my all-time favorite baseball player, my childhood idol, the legendary Indiana. You know, and so I've been afforded these incredible opportunities, and it all started for me as a volunteer. And now I move from being a volunteer to trying to lead this great institution. And so it's been an amazing journey for me as well.
When you look at what the Rough Riders are doing here with the Black Giants and also the role of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, how important is it for people to understand what these players went through, their stories, and how important the Negro Leagues were in the arc of baseball?
I think it's extremely important because what we hope that people will gain is an understanding of certainly the circumstances that created a need for a Negro Leagues. And of course, American segregation was a horrible chapter in this country's history. But the story of the Negro Leagues, there's nothing sad or somber about that story. That story is what they were able to do in the face of tremendous social adversity. And so the story is kind of twofold. So we paint the picture of the challenges that they had to face. They could ride into a town, fill up a ballpark, and yet not be able to get a meal from the same fans who had just cheered them, or not have a place to stay. So they would sleep on the bus and eat their peanut butter and crackers until they could get to a place that would offer them basic services. But y'all, they never allowed that set of social circumstances to kill their love of the game. So their spirit was, okay, if I've got to sleep on the bus, and if I've got to eat my peanut butter and crackers, I'm going to keep playing ball. And really, that's the spirit that you feel when you walk inside the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. I do think a lot of our guests expect that they're going to encounter a very sad, somber kind of story, but it's not. It's a celebration, and we treat it as such. But it is the celebration of the power of the human spirit to persevere and prevail. So their love of the game not only helped change the game, but it helped change our country for the better. And that's why I say when people walk away from that experience at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, they walk away with what I believe is a much deeper, richer appreciation for just how great this country really is.
No one really brought that like Buck ONeil. Buck ONeil, who was an incredible part of the organization of the museum and then also the fabric of baseball. When you first met Buck ONeil, what was your first impression of him?
I was like everybody else. I fell in love with him. It was love at first sight. And I tell people all the time, once you're bitten by the buck bug, there is no antidote. It is a wrap. You know, and I just want to be on Buck's team. The charisma, the energy, the passion that he had for this mission. And when I first met Buck, and it's strange because Kansas City is not that big. It's not Dallas. It's a big city, but it feels more like a town. And so you typically know all the prominent people, but somehow or another, he and I had never encountered one another within our social circles. And so when I met Buck for the first time in 1993, one of the first questions that I asked him was, what motivated you to want to build a Negro Leagues Baseball Museum? And his answer was very succinct, but also poignant, so that we would be remembered. And he did not want them to be forgotten for what they had given this game and what they had given this country. Yeah, they helped make this country better by their sheer love of the game. And he wanted them to be remembered. So he wanted to build a place where their stories could be fully told, but their stories could be used as a tool of inspiration for young people. Because as much as this is a tremendously rich educational piece when you walk into that museum, it is just as much a tool of inspiration. I think our young people, when they walk into that museum, first and foremost, they are flabbergasted by a segregated society. They can't even fathom an America that was separated by color. Segregation summarized through the eyes of a child is done so very simply. That was done. And they're right, it was done. But it was the way that our country was. And so they walk into that environment and they see this will that these individuals had, this passion that they had for game. Y'all, it would have been easy for them to quit. They weren't making that much money. So it would have been easy for them to quit and say, the hell with this. But they never did. They knew they could play this game. And they wanted everybody to know that they could play this game. And so when you're introduced to that kind of strong-willed mindset, I do think it serves as a tool of inspiration, a wonderful tool of hope, so that when you are encountering your own hardships, that maybe you can draw from that inspiration that we see through this incredible story of the Negro.
ONeil will be inducted into the Hall of Fame. I know you're incredibly excited.
Man, I've been smiling ever since Sunday, December the 5th. Last year.
What's going to go through your mind when you're at that induction ceremony and you see all the emotions surrounding you?
Well, I know that it's going to be tremendously emotional for me. Buck ONeil was one of my very best friends. He was my mentor and my confidant. And of course, for those of you who may not be familiar with this story as it relates to the Hall of Fame, he missed by one vote in 2006. And he ultimately passed away that same year. And to be honest, y'all, we all thought it was going to be a shoo-in that Buck was going into the Hall of Fame in 2006. And so I was the marketing director of the museum at that time. And so I had broken a deal with our friend Sprint, who's now T-Mobile. And so we're going to take the Hall of Fame call on the Sprint phone. And so Buck had his Sprint phone. I've got my Sprint phone. We're going to take the Hall of Fame call on the Sprint phone, and then Sprint is going to pay us a bunch of money to help build the Buck ONeil Education and Research Center. Absolutely brilliant, if I have to say so myself. And so the call was supposed to come in February 27th of 2006. And Buck ONeil and I left home that morning with suitcases packed, with airline tickets that the Hall of Fame had purchased for us. That's how sure we were that Buck was going in. So the call was supposed to come to me at 10 o'clock that morning. A committee of 12 Negro historians, educators, and researchers had gathered down in Tampa, Florida, where they were going to make the final decision on a list of about 35 that made the final ballot. Buck ONeil and the late, great Minnie Minoso were the only two living names on that list. And so the call was going to come to me at 10 o'clock. Well, 10 o'clock rolls around, I don't get a phone call. About noon, my colleague, Dr. Ray Doddswell, who was one of the 12 members of that committee, called and said, Bob, this thing is looking tight. We just did straw voting. Buck is coming up one vote shy. Former Commissioner Faye Vincent, who was overseeing the committee, he has brought us back, reconvened us, so that we could talk about Buck and Minnie Minoso. Again, the two guys who were still alive. My good friend, the great writer, Joe Posnanski, is in the conference room with Buck. I called Joe out. I said, hey, Joe, I just got a call from Ray. He says this thing is looking tight. They just did straw vote. Buck's coming up to vote shot. He's in disbelief. Well, finally, about 2 o'clock, Jeff Iverson, who was then the vice president of marketing for the Hall of Fame, he just recently retired as the president of the National Baseball Hall of Fame. He calls me and he said, Bob, Buck didn't get enough votes. And y'all, I felt like someone had kicked me in my gut. Because now I got to go back in this conference room and tell my friend that he didn't get enough votes when I know in his heart he thought he was in. Why wouldn't he? And so I go into the conference room, I excuse a few folks. Buck is seated at the head of the table. Joe is kind of where you are. I go to the opposite side, and I'm really, y'all, trying to collect myself. I don't know how I'm going to tell him. And I finally look up at Buck and I say, well, Buck, we didn't get enough votes. And he looks up at me and he smiles. He says, well, that's how the cookie crumbles. And in the next voice, he asked me how many had gotten in. I said 17. Now, I'll be honest, I was furious. Because in my mind, you can't put 17 in and leave Buck out when there was no limitation on the number of people that you could put in. He hits the table in utter jubilation. He is excited that 17 of his colleagues had gotten their rightful place in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. He asked me who they were, and I didn't have that information at that point in time, and the next words that came out of his mouth, I wonder if the Hall of Fame will invite me to speak. Now, Joe Posnanski had turned beet red. He is furious, and he looks at Buck and says, Buck, you wouldn't do that, would you? Buck says, Joe, of course I would. What has my life been about? I said, well, Buck, I need to go downstairs because down in the museum on the Field of Legends, we had some 300 plus people who had gathered for what we all thought was going to be a Hall of Fame celebration announcement. I said, Buck, I need to go downstairs. I need to go deliver the news. I'll come back and get you. I think you should address the group, and then we'll let everybody go home. It's been a long day. Well, y'all, as I so oftentimes tell the story, from our upstairs conference room to the Field of Legends down inside the Negro Baseball Museum, it was the longest walk of my life. I was literally trying to coach myself. Bob, you can't cry. You can't cry. This is your job. You got to suck it up. Now, the more I'm telling myself not to cry, tears are steady building up in my eyes. We have a podium at second base. And this is the honest to God's truth. I have yet to go back and watch that video. I have no idea what I said that day, but whatever it was, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. People were openly emotional. And y'all, this wasn't disappointment. This was anger. This was outrage. How dare they do this to our Buck ONeil? And so Buck walks in through the gift shop, and the room, of course, erupts into this thunderous ovation. And he walks up to the podium, and for lack of a better term, delivered one of the most amazing concession speeches that I've ever heard. What he did that day was he literally implored all of us not to be angry, not to be bitter, not to express any ill will toward anyone who had anything to do with this decision. As he would go on to say, I had an opportunity. And in this great country, that's all you can ever ask. They didn't think old Buck was good enough. We got to live with that. But if I'm a Hall of Famer in your eyes, that's all that matters to me. Just keep on loving old Buck. Now, by this time, I'm a complete wreck. Tears are just flowing down my face. But guys, what Buck did that day was he literally reached out his arms, wrapped them around all of us, and said, it's okay. Instead of us consoling him, he's consoling us. And what I still say to this day to be one of the greatest displays of strength of character that I've ever witnessed. He would push aside his disappointment, go to Cooperstown, deliver this impassioned speech on behalf of 17 dead folks who did not have a voice. You know, it's 16 years later, and I still can't believe that they missed on this so egregiously. You can't have a celebration with dead folks, and particularly dead folks that people really didn't know. And so Buck was there to make you care about those individuals. The world was saying it should be your induction speech, and there he was speaking on behalf of those who didn't have a voice. Again, I say it to be one of the most selfless acts in American sports history. A little over 2 months later, he passed away himself at age 94, a month shy of his 95th birthday. And so when we get the word in December, Sunday, December 5th, about 5:45 Central Standard Time, that we get the word that he had now finally been voted into the Hall of Fame, I was overcome then with emotion, because now reflecting back at that point in time, 15 years prior, I could finally exhale, and I was elated, but still it's a little bittersweet because I wish my guy was here, you know, so that we could high five, chest bump, hug our guy. We won't be able to do that, but his spirit, I know it will absolutely, as he would call the Hall of Fame, the valley. It will fill up the valley, and I'm sure when it becomes official, that he becomes a member of this immortal group of those who dedicated their lives to this game. I'm sure I'll be overcome with emotion. And this time there will be tears of joy, as opposed to those tears of despair in 2006.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to when that comes to fruition here this summer, of course. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back here at the top of the first inning. We're going to test out his arm a little bit, get that first pitch action going. And we'll have a little ceremony down the field, and then we'll be right back up here. So join us back here at the top of the first inning. Bob Kendrick, everybody.
Come back and join us. We're going to tell some more lies. Yeah, we're going to tell some more lies. Come on back and join us.